Noise downstairs. Let's see if this works.
We're live.
I'm assuming we are going live. We are live. So welcome back, everybody. Of course, this is Dr. Keith McNally on his YouTube channel, and I do welcome you to Conversations with Mitch Gray. I have here Mitch Gray, and we co-host a conversation weekly. Men's mental health is basically our topic, and we want to encourage men all over the globe to get things right with themselves. And so kind of that's our goal. Now, we've been talking about all different things, and it's not necessarily about going to therapy and, gushing out all kind of emotions and feelings, although that's part of it. And so today we want to address when it's right, when it's the right time to jump into that therapy session. And as you know, in our conversations, Mitch went on a 30-day retreat last year sometime, maybe early part of last year. And I officially, air quotes, due to an increase in PT symptoms associated with PTSD, specifically around depression, um, and some other psychiatric issues. And so I thought it necessarily important for me to kind of do the therapy thing. And so you and I specifically had a conversation saying that was not an easy transition for me, because I was kind of really building around the idea that, ever since my most recent suicide attempt in 2021, starting having all these conversations and starting all these podcasts, I was living vicariously through other people's successes and really growing from the experience. But I've hit a roadblock, a standpoint that's, there's something more. I gotta jump over this hurdle that I don't seem to be able to cross. And so I took the dive. And so on a weekly basis, I do my therapy thing. Mitch, how do we know when it's really the right time? Now, I didn't know. Like you and I talked, and we could have easily said, "Well, Keith, you should probably have done it 3 years ago," and you're probably right. Whenever you're thinking about suicide and things are crashing around you, it's probably a good time to kind of step into therapy. Um, but because I felt, and I'm going to use the cliche word. I think this word is being used frequently a lot, at least on social media in terms of, therapy, stuck. And it's typically used in a coaching situation where, a client feels stuck. They're not getting any progress based on all the things they're doing currently. Just kind of felt stuck in life. And I kind of wanted to have more control over how things are going in my life. And I thought therapy was the next step. Mitch, how do we know when therapy really is the next step?
I'm going to use you as an example because I think what you experience is probably what many people experience. And I'm just basing this off of the hundreds, if not thousands, of people I've talked to before, my own experience, your experience. And that is, first of all, if you're thinking that it's time for therapy, it's probably past time for therapy. Not that it's ever too late.
Okay.
And then I also want to say, I would dare to say that if you looked back, you would probably respond with, "I wished I would have started sooner." And that's what I hear most people say is that, man, once I got into it, because it is scary. We've talked about that before. There are a lot of fears. There's a lot of trepidation. There's a lot of stereotypes about therapy. There's a lot of pride involved, especially when we're talking about men's mental health.
Hmm.
There's a lot of pride involved. Men, and we've talked about this, men are not taught to be vulnerable. We're taught to be men. We're taught to be tough, and we're not taught to be expressive. We're not taught to experience our emotions and feelings, much less express them. We're just taught to go about our business, keep our head down, work hard, do the right things, and it'll all work out. The problem is that recipe doesn't work. It just doesn't. And the generation before us, they got to the end of their lives and are realizing it didn't work. It doesn't work. The generation before them got to the end of their lives and realized it didn't work. And so, what we can learn from the generations previous to us is that we don't have to wait. There's, I remember as a kid that there was almost this noble idea that you got to the end of your life and looked back and wished you would have done it differently. That was almost spoken of with like this nobility. And it's
Mm.
like, why am I going to wait till the end of my life? I'm not living this life for a next life. I'm living this life for this life. And so I would say if you're thinking about therapy, it's probably past time. Once you get into it and begin experiencing it, you will wish you would have started sooner. And so, and my other thought is, I think I'm really frustrated with the American health system because I wished everyone was given as a citizen of this country the opportunity to have therapy and other things, by the way. But it can be very expensive. Fortunately, some states are making it to where it's much more accessible. It's not as expensive or even free. I don't know which states for sure. I know the state that I live in is that way. Other states are doing that as well. So we're kind of turning the corner to really trying to get the services that are needed to the people that need it most. Another barrier can be if you live in a very remote community, you may not have a therapist at your disposal.
Mm.
Like that's a legitimate concern. The great remedy is there are websites like BetterHelp or other websites that you can do it virtually. And so we've really come a long way, even though we don't offer it as a free benefit of being an American citizen as we should. We at least have opportunities that are much more accessible than they previously were. You know, back in the day, you had to go to a therapist. There was no video call or anything like that. So the remote barrier, that was a real barrier. The embarrassment factor, that was a real barrier. Well, now you never have to leave your home. No one ever has to know you're going through therapy. And so if you're thinking of it, it's probably past time. Once you get into it, you'll wish you would have started it sooner.
So since we're using me as the guinea pig here, so let me address some of the nuances of stepping into that process. For me, it was recognizing that there were things that were going on in my life that were frustrating, even a bit scary. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a legitimate, those are legitimate words. And so things that were going on in my life that says, you know, um, if I continue down this path, I'll probably see another suicide attempt. And that, I don't want to do that. And actually, that's very specific and intentional. I don't want to go down that path again. It's a very scary, lonely, and distressing
Mm-hmm.
path to go through. And I don't want to see that happen again. Two, I wanted to actually be better. If that makes any sense. Not
Yeah.
that, there's a problem with who I am, but it's not all, now that I've kind of seen how other people have really taken on a transition, a pivot, and have really grown from the experience. And of course, we're talking about everything that happened since COVID and all of the conversations that I've had. And so at this point, conversations with Mitch Gray, I think, is 6 or 7 on the list of individual types
Yeah.
of podcasts that I have. And so, and they're all specific to an individual niche. But it was the people that I was talking with that took the transition seriously. So whatever that was, some of them did go to therapy, but some of them went to a coach, and all of them were specific and said, I don't like where I am now, and I know I need help to move forward
Yeah.
in a different direction. And so that's
Yeah.
two. It's not only just being afraid of going down a dark road, it's knowing that things quite possibly be better, meaning
Right.
that, yeah, meaning that
Right.
I want to experience more of life. I want to be happier, or I want to be
Yeah.
better in relationships, or even to the sense of wanting to be better at things that you do normally, enjoying eating breakfast rather than it just being a breakfast, enjoying watching a TV show with family rather than you just kind of sitting there taking up space. There's a whole sense of who you are and how you, and this is kind of
Yeah.
cliche again, how you show up in the present moment with the people that are
Mm-hmm.
around you. And you could show up as a person, or you could show up as your full self. And I know
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of talk about showing up authentically, and again, in the coaching situation, but truly showing up as the person who you want to be
Yeah.
is rather dramatic. And so, rather than just for each of us men showing up saying, just kind of being empty, maybe that's a good word, I don't know, emotionally or emotionally present, really showing up with the power of being who you are and experiencing the moment with the people that are around you is a good thing.
Yeah, and it takes an intention, right? So I think back to my childhood. So I grew up in on the farm in Oklahoma. Life was very simple. Um, I don't say this disrespectfully. In fact, I say it with a lot of respect. People were very simple minded, meaning life was very simple. There weren't a lot of decisions to be made. We grew up in a really small town.
Hmm.
So you didn't have to worry about things like which grocery store to shop at or which movie theater to go to or going to the shop. Like there was none of that. There was one grocery store, that's where you went. So life was just very simple. There were really very few decisions to be made. And I think back to that culture and I can remember conversations of people talking about why are other people making life so difficult? And when you're talking, I'm kind of reminiscing about the conversations I heard growing up. And still I have friends and family members and family friends who still live in that culture. It's very simple. Not a lot of thought goes into living life. You just kind of, a lot of people were born and raised there and are still there and they'll raise their kids there and grandkids. And so the generation continues, right? But as I've grown for myself personally, I've understood two things. Number one, none of us are the same. So I look at the culture I grew up in, and it was good for some of my family members who are still there. It wasn't good for me. And that's okay. And because none of us are the same, our dispositions are all very, very different. I have cousins that grew up in the same culture I did. It was great for them. It was very damaging for me. So that's number one. Number two, there are just some of us that want a deeper part of living. We don't want to just swim in the shallow waters. We want to swim in the deep waters. We want to go over the mountaintop. We want to explore the world. We want to find out what else exists. And that's okay. And I think that's kind of the point I'm trying to make is whichever path you choose, it's okay. Just choose the path that's best for you and encourage people to choose the path that's best for them. I remember when we moved, when I was in middle school, and people would ask my parents, why would you ever move from this place? And it's like, because my parents wanted something else. And instead of getting reprimanded, instead of getting encouraged, they often got reprimanded because it was like, why did you ever leave here? Oh, I don't know, because it's a town of 800 people and there's nothing here. Like there's no future and no hope. Maybe, I don't know. But for some people, there is a future and hope. And I think that's kind of the point is what does that have to do with therapy? Choose the path that's best for you, no matter what else, no matter what anyone else is saying, no matter what anyone else is doing, no matter what you were taught about therapy, no matter if you grew up in a culture that was very against therapy or vulnerability or experiencing your emotions, or if you grew up in a culture that was accepting of that. It doesn't matter. Choose the path that's best for you. And sometimes those voices from the past can haunt us. It's like, well, no, my parents didn't believe in therapy, or my parents were religious and I'm not, or I grew up in a culture that, manhood was the king and we didn't express our emotions. But you have to find the path that's best for you. And that's what you've experienced is you were walking down one path, but through your experience and your decisions, you've really decided to take a totally different path and approach to your life. That takes intention. That takes a purposeful, meaningful dialogue internally and externally to go, something's not right for me. I need to change that. And, we've seen that the last few years in the LGBTQ community, where it's like they finally have a voice. They're finally getting some protection. They're finally getting some liberties and some freedom and some opportunity. And people are finally coming around to support this idea. That's not an old idea, by the way. That this way of living and this path is that's not a new idea. I'm sorry, it's a very old idea. And so I think we just have to take these things and really go, what's the best path for me, for my life? This is not anyone else's life. This is your life. What's the best path for you moving forward?
I love that because I actually wrote a book
Yes, you did.
called Walking
Based
the
on many
Path.
of our based on many of those types of conversations. That's right.
True, true. I mean, everything that you're saying is exactly the nature of the book. So, Walking the Path, a Leader's Journey, is about a young man who grows up in a very much a community, a small community, like the one you grew up in, very, very, set in their ways. They're isolated
Very
from the rest
rural.
of, very rural.
Yeah.
They're actually a community in a valley surrounded by
Yeah.
mountains, and it's kind of the nature of the story. But the story, the narrative, and the fable is also mixed with the idea of, developing yourself, pulling people together, learning to become vulnerable, learning to accept change, and actually taking risk to accomplish that change. And for this young man and his group of friends, accomplish achieving change means to leave the community,
Yeah.
climb the mountain, and find out what's on the other side. And so, very, very, very much, what you're saying is find the path that you need to walk, find the path that's right for you. And then so I think out of the subconscious mind, that book manifested itself. But of course, through all the conversations that you and I have had, plus all the other conversations I've had with many, many people in the past, 3 years. Now, the book was
Yeah.
written and published in 2022, but it's still very, very much cliche, or I should say, an intimate part of my journey because
Mm-hmm.
the next path I've got to cross is the Appalachian Trail. And that's
Yeah.
something entirely different. That's actually taking the book and manifesting it into reality. And so
Real life.
the
Yeah.
real life, that's part of my, and it's actually become part of my, my spiritual journey because it's
Yeah.
no longer an issue for me to, hike 15, 20 miles in a day. That's people say that's absurd, but it's no longer a physical challenge. It's actually I hiked 21 miles yesterday, and at the time of this recording on Monday. And so I'm going to post that video, to my YouTube channel. But I'm here saying once you find that path,
Mm-hmm.
it feels good to be on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels part of everything that's been missing, maybe up until this
Yeah.
point in my life. But it's as much a spiritual as it is a physical and emotional and, cognitive, psychological journey for me. And so I feel
Yeah.
like I'm becoming who I am, and it feels good.
That's good. It's good. I like it.
Mitch, I thank you for this time. Always conversations with Mitch Gray, always of value to me, and hopefully it's a value to everybody else who's watching and listening. Mitch, I need you to share these these videos with your network
Yes, I
as
need to do
as
that.
as I do with mine. And so, with that being said, I thank everybody for watching and listening. Hopefully, this was helpful, and we'll see you next time. Take care.